period in history and a specific event in history. And people have concluded, I believe erroneously. And by the way, is Jason right about this? Is Jason wrong about this? Have these others in the white sympathetic spheres, are they wrong when it comes to this deduction about this event in history, and that it has to be disproven, it has to be denied, it has to be evidence galore has to be pulled out, because if this isn't taken down, then we can never, what we refer to here is recapture our destiny. I don't know what the hell they want to do, but what we would like to do is recapture our destiny, which means a number of things. First and foremost, that's recapturing your thoughts from the anti-whites. So we decide what recapturing our destiny means, and we decide anytime we want what it means, nothing more, nothing less, anti-whites. So these people, very educated, very intelligent, all the way down the spectrum to quite dumb as all get out, they have concluded that, well, this has got to be knocked down. And perhaps many of you have, since so many others were saying the same thing, and because so many others who were educated and intelligent and focused on it for a very long time were saying the same thing, you just adopted it. You didn't even really think about it. How will that really work? Could it possibly work? Well, what ends up happening when you decide that this particular period in history and this particular event has to be denied, proven false, evidence brought forward, numbers are different, and all of this sort of nonsense? What ends up happening? Well, we've talked about this many times before, and that is that you are burning your reputation up with your interlocutor, your audience. How many? 1 person, 10 people, 1,000 people, whoever you're talking with. You end up burning your reputation to pieces. Remember that what actually happened is totally irrelevant. All that matters now is helping our brothers and sisters to go free. What actually happened in that conversation, now be intelligent here. It's not totally irrelevant as far as science or as far as history 1 year or 1,000 years from now. It's not totally irrelevant in many other ways. But as far as that conversation is concerned, it is totally irrelevant. All it can do is prevent you from sharing anything else that you have to talk about. All it can do is taint everything else that you want to talk about. All it can do is undermine you. All it can do is get you fired. All it can do is prevent you from being elected. All it can do is on and on. So much negative when it comes to that approach. You only have so long and so many points of contention with your audience. You don't want to burn any of those points of contention up on an issue you cannot win. You simply cannot win. And even if you do, even if you are able to win with the person or people that you're speaking to in that moment, and you've convinced them a little bit, you have them for moments. The anti-whites have them for their lives. And even if they decide that they're never going to change their opinion from what you had convinced them of, well, they're not going to tell a soul, because they too know everything that we know that will happen to you, everything I was just citing that will happen to you if you deny, pull out evidence, claim different numbers, and all of this sort of nonsense. It is not, ladies and gentlemen, first you need to hear this. That particular period in history and that particular event is not the central pillar that holds up the entire edifice. Period. I know you have heard this from a lot of people. Let me turn the AC because I'm getting a little heated. I know you have heard this from a lot of people over the years, and you have even adopted it, as I said, unthinkingly, that this is somehow some central pillar. And I would not be surprised to discover that our victimizers were the ones fueling the idea with that endless cash and power that so many of them wield, fueling the idea that this thing has to be destroyed before you can do anything else. because there is no destroying this thing. Not in that conversation you're having, not societally. You having a hope in hell. It is asinine as far as my view and how I consider this. It is totally asinine. And I've been very nice. And when people have said this in my presence, I haven't burned them down. If we've been in public. But this idea that this event and period in history has to be torn down in order for us to get anywhere else or for us to have anything else is ludicrous. It is impossible. And not only that, but it's part of the old paradigm that we've discussed many times, where people say, well, you just educate, and I'll just give the synopsis. You educate people about everything in the world with the antithetical positions about everything in the world, and then a God of the gaps moment happens. They don't know what it is, but suddenly we are in a better situation, all of humanity, and incidentally, white people as well. That means, as Lovely Porge points out, that these individuals making these arguments are only incidentally concerned with white well-being. But it's a part of this same old paradigm that will get you nowhere. You're never going to convince the world that this didn't happen or that the numbers were different or anything like that. So stop. Just stop. The people who are most responsible for that are, of course, the ant-nats. But this seems to have like permeated so much of these white sympathetic spheres. And I don't care how few hairs the people who are saying this have left, or how white their hair and how many degrees they have hanging on their walls, or whatever it might be. I don't give a shit. Sorry, pardon me. I don't give a Sierra. Don't copy that, kids. I don't care. They are wrong. So you ask yourself, how do you handle it then? How do you handle it when an anti-white says to you that, well, white people have committed mass murders and genocide against non-white people? How do you handle that? You put it in a context that diffuses it. Every race has committed mass genocide or mass murder, genocide, endeavored to commit genocide. Every race has done. And we condemn, and then you can, of course, cite the mass murder of the numbers are still to be counted, are still being counted, of how many scores of millions killed in the Soviet Union, scores of millions killed in China. You can, of course, talk about that event that begins with the letter H, and the ear is against the door. The ear is against the door. You can talk about that event that begins with an H. You can just mention it. Don't dive into it. Don't you dare say this other particular group did this. And so therefore, you don't focus on the other groups. You focus on us. You condemn every act of mass murder. And right now, the mass white erasure, segueing, is taking place in every Western country on planet Earth. That is happening right now. That's not something that happened in history. So my question to you, interlocutor, is how anti-white are you? Are you going to put an end to white erasure? Biological white erasure? Are you going to put an end to it? Or are you going to continue to be anti-white? I have handled this thrown at me maybe 100 times with brilliant success. But do you believe? But do you believe? Well, sure, I'm not a historian, but I condemn all mass murder. All mass murder. And there is a white erasure taking place right now. Where do you fall on that issue?